South Africa's construction industry is worth billions of rands every year, employing thousands of people and contributing to the development of the country. But this sector is under threat. The so-called construction mafia is holding contractors to ransom, demanding employment, cash, and even halting projects, even if it means intimidating workers, damaging property, and getting violent. Groups claiming to be business forums rock up at construction projects. They will strong-arm their way onto the site and forcefully disrupt operations. It's an alarming trend that even President 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝘀 has raised concerns about as far back as 2018.
That is not radical economic transformation. That is radical economic robbery, and we cannot allow that.
They are weaponized, organized people, use extortionate methods to achieve compliance with their needs that are not in line with the law.
𝗀𝗵𝗶𝘀 from the South African Forum of Civil Engineering Contractors says the industry is powerless against this criminality.
We are trained to build the infrastructure. The industry is not trained on warfare.
The current tension stems from what appears to be a misunderstanding of a national treasury regulation related to subcontracting. The Preferential Procurement Regulations of 2017 requires bidders of projects to contract a portion of the development to small businesses in local communities, specifically black-owned businesses. 30% of projects over 30 million should go to local contractors, but that applies to government projects and not the private sector. Yet the private construction sector is being targeted on a daily basis across the country. Karen de Beer owns a medium construction business and has experienced the wrath of the construction mafia on her sites.
Karen, have you ever had a point where you have to close your site for a day?
Not for a day, not for a week, for months.
Karen is beyond frustrated. It now takes almost double the time to complete projects because of disruptions at the hands of volatile groups masquerading as business forums.
They come in, they run 100 of them. You can't control so many people, and they just break down the walls that you have just built.
This is unfortunately starting to become a South African model of doing business. The reason it's growing the way it is because it's working.
The damage to the economy is severe and the consequences are far-reaching, explains legal expert 𝗶𝗶𝘀.
If their demands aren't met, individuals will be hurt, plant and the project will suffer, be burnt, damaged, destroyed.
The projects that are being disrupted are around 42 billion rand, an issue which would have been a state of emergency if it was in other countries in advanced economies.
While court interdicts offer some relief to contractors, it's not a cure-all. Amongst the affected projects were two major contracts worth billions of rands that were awarded to listed companies. The Sanral N2 Wild Coast Road construction project in the Eastern Cape was eventually abandoned over fears for the safety of their employees, while a German oil storage investment project in Saldanha Bay suffered 75 million rands worth of damage to equipment and structures at the hands of so-called business forums in a matter of hours.
When the police arrive on time, watch the properties being touched, watch the employees running through the field, through the back door, including women, and say, we are not trained as the police to deal with public violence.
The police's seeming reluctance to deal with these cases at station level appears to be a national trend. Combating this crime will require high-level police intervention, explains Barnard.
The way in which the conduct is carried out is basic thuggery. But there is a method to this madness. This is organized, and it's getting worse.
We came across one of these business forums in Brooklyn, Pretoria. They were aggressive from the moment we arrived.
Hey, turn off that thing before. Turn off that thing before.
Eventually, the man claiming to be in charge, 𝗵𝗶𝗶𝗀, agreed to an interview. He says he represents military veterans from the wider Pretoria area.
The 30% of the community should be given to the community. Okay. You understand? And that is not terrorism. That is not maybe to be, to be taxed and stuff like that.
But aren't there processes that need to be followed for the community to be involved?
There are processes that we have started to talk with this guy. This guy is not the owner of this project.
𝗀𝗵𝗋 is a security consultant for the Brooklyn development.
It's a private-owned land. It's a private development. The developers are basically put at a choice of either continuing under the demands of these groups or work at a loss.
The group is adamant that they want their share of the profits and say they will take matters into their own hands.
We ask him to give us the bill of quantity so that we can quantify the percent of the locality. Now, if he does not adhere to that, we will be left with no option but to close this site.
The construction mafia knows no boundaries, explains 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝗶𝘀 from Master Builders South Africa.
You cannot go to a construction site and start demanding books, bills of quantities, and so forth. You don't do that. That's not how it works. It's mafia tendencies that we're speaking about. That is not acceptable at all.
But the group insisted they were within their rights.
That any project that comes to the locality, 30% should be given to that particular community.
Government projects?
Government and private.
No.
I have my proofs here.
Government and public.
I'm afraid that's not correct. You've got private sector and you've got public sector. Private sector, you can hire whoever you want. There is nothing regulating that. In public sector, there are specific laws and regulations which deal with how government has to procure those services.
When we tried to clarify this point, the group turned on us.
There's no use of talking to you, in fact, because you are against what you are saying now. Get away from us! Get away from us! You racist! Leave us alone. Privilege to come and tell us. Leave us alone.
And as you can see, this is obviously the treatment that people constantly get. Threats, intimidation, and bullying. And I can't imagine what it must be like if you even work in construction to have to deal with this every day.
Shortly after we left with our cameras, the men forced their way onto the site and demanded that workers down tools. The Federation for Radical Economic Transformation represents a number of business forums nationwide. Spokesperson 𝗀𝗶𝗶𝗶𝘀 claims the Federation is making a positive impact in bridging the divide between their members and contractors.
Our forums affiliate to us. They've got a constitution. They are registered. And therefore, anything else that calls itself forum outside of that, we distance ourselves from them.
While 𝗀𝗍𝗍 admits that there's been trial and error to their approach in the past, he insists the Federation's members are not thugs.
Even I was scared for my life.
It's an isolated incident, and most of them that are taking that shape, I guess they fall outside of the scope of our mandate. We need to isolate it and condemn it with all contempt that it deserves.
It is by no means an isolated incident. This is a daily reality for contractors all over the country, confirmed 𝗀𝗶𝗶𝗀.
In many areas that we experience these mafia tendencies, the contractors are black contractors. The main contractors and the subcontractors are all black contractors.
In some cases, the exploitation even extends to the very people they claim to represent, explains Barnard.
But when these forums come along, they then take a cut or a percentage of the money that's generated, meaning that the actual humans on site doing the work end up by earning less than they would have earned if they'd been employed directly.
𝗀𝗍𝗍 argues forums are not unions and are there to make money.
Just because it's black business, it doesn't mean now we must take care of the social element of the economy. We are there not to make money like every other business, and we are not saying we are not apologetic. It's a capitalist system.
Some forums have even taken it a step further. They don't want jobs, they'll simply settle for cold, hard cash.
You can be offered the money.
What money?
To be out of the site so that the company can proceed peacefully.
So it's either protection money or a buyout. And then they say, I will leave your site and you can work with who you want and we won't bother you.
What kind of monies are we talking here?
Anything from a few thousand to hundreds of thousands.
The moment that you pay any of them back, you are done. I mean, I refuse to pay protection money because otherwise, how can I work?
It seems to be a lucrative income stream, with these rogue business forums even going up against each other.
Even if you were to give them their demands, tomorrow another one comes and say, okay, you contracted with that one. It's not part of us. We are independent from that one. You have got to contract with us. It can't work. No. It's not working at all.
𝗀𝗍𝗍 also doesn't feel things are working. He believes the current legislation simply cannot effectively address economic transformation. It needs to include the private sector too.
For us to take this country and the economy forward, we need to be cognizant of the imbalances of the past. So we are talking about people that have been colonized for centuries, people that have been given a certain type of education, and all of a sudden you come and say, we've voted, we are equal. We can never be equal. Hence, the legislation of 30% participation in government is not sufficient to transform the economy.
But calling it radical economic transformation doesn't justify thuggery. It's criminal behavior that costs the country billions of rands in losses and negatively impacts on international investor perceptions. Some would call this economic sabotage.
All these cases where they violently disrupt an over 2 billion rand project, you cannot equate it to a boy who has stolen a bar of chocolate in a supermarket. You need to deal with this matter through the Prevention of Organized Crime Act.
President Ramaphosa promised action in his 2020 State of the Nation address.
I have prioritized our response to the growing problem of criminal groups that extort money from construction and other businesses. Specialized units bringing together South African Police Service and the National Prosecuting Authority are mandated to combat these crimes of economic disruption.
While all parties agree that economic transformation is necessary, the execution is problematic and these disruptions are not economically sustainable.
We can't have South African business growing at gunpoint. If the will of the people is that there's not enough being done, then that has to be dealt with by the legislature.
Because if we don't deal with this problem, I am afraid we will see the collapse of the construction industry in South Africa. We will continue to see many people losing their jobs as a result of this so-called construction mafia.